The unforgiving sun beat down on Katherine Bennett's pale skin as she stumbled across the endless prairie, her once fine blue dress torn and dusty, her boots worn through at the soles. 3 days without proper water had left her lips cracked and bleeding, her throat so dry each breath felt like swallowing sand. The distant mountains shimmered like a mirage, seeming no closer than they had yesterday or the day before. She clutched the locket around her neck, the last remnant of her former life, and wondered if this vast, empty Wyoming territory would become her final resting place. "Just keep walking," she whispered to herself, the words barely audible over the constant prairie wind that tugged at her honey-blonde hair, now matted and tangled. "Just keep walking." The stagecoach robbery had left her with nothing but the clothes on her back and this seemingly endless journey. The other passengers, all men, had been killed outright. The bandits had dragged her some distance before she'd managed to escape during the night. Now, she was hopelessly lost, each rise in the land revealing only more prairie grass swaying in the wind, stretching to the horizon in every direction. Katherine stumbled, her knees hitting the hard-packed earth. The world tilted dangerously, black spots dancing before her eyes. She didn't have the strength to rise again. As consciousness began to slip away, she thought she heard hoofbeats, but dismissed it as another hallucination like the lakes of cool water she'd been seeing since yesterday. The sound grew louder. A shadow fell across her face. Through blurry vision, she made out the silhouette of a man on horseback, haloed by the merciless sun. "Madam?" His voice was deep, concerned. "Madam, can you hear me?" She tried to respond, but her parched throat produced only a rasp before darkness claimed her completely. Water. Cool, blessed water on her lips. Katherine swallowed greedily, feeling rivulets escape and run down her chin. "Easy now," that same deep voice cautioned. "Too much too fast will make you sick." Her eyes fluttered open. She was lying on a bedroll beneath a small canvas shelter. A man knelt beside her, holding a canteen to her lips. His face was sun-bronzed and weathered, with kind gray eyes beneath the brim of a well-worn hat. Dark stubble shadowed his strong jaw, and a layer of trail dust covered his denim and leather attire. "Where?" she managed to croak. "About 15 miles southwest of Rock Springs," he replied, helping her take another careful sip. "Found you collapsed on the prairie. What's a lady like you doing out here all alone?" Katherine's memory flooded back: the stagecoach, the gunshots, the men's screams, her desperate flight into the wilderness. "Robbers," she whispered. "They attacked our stagecoach. 3 days ago, I think. I got away, but I've been lost ever since." The man's expression darkened. "Stagecoach to Salt Lake City," she nodded weakly. "We heard about that. They found the coach and the bodies." His voice softened. "Name's Adam Tucker. I've got a small spread about half a day's ride from here." "Katherine Bennett," she replied. "Thank you for saving my life, Mr. Tucker." "Call me Adam," he said, adjusting the canvas to better shield her from the sun. "Rest now, Miss Bennett. We'll ride for my place once you've got some strength back. You're safe now." Katherine wanted to say more, but exhaustion claimed her again, pulling her into a dreamless sleep. When she woke, the sun was low in the sky, painting the prairie in hues of orange and gold. Adam was tending a small fire, a coffee pot nestled in the coals. He glanced up as she stirred. "Evening," he said. Feeling any better, Katherine pushed herself to a sitting position, testing her limbs. Everything ached, but the terrible dizziness had subsided. "Yes, thank you." He handed her a tin cup of water. "Think you could manage some jerky and hardtack? Not much of a supper, but it'll put something in your stomach." "That would be wonderful." Katherine realized she was ravenous. She accepted the simple fare gratefully. trying to maintain some semblance of ladylike behavior despite her desperate hunger. As she ate, she studied her rescuer. Adam Tucker was not what she'd call handsome in the conventional sense, too weathered, too rough around the edges, but there was something compelling about his quiet strength and the gentleness with which he'd tended to her. "Those robbers," Adam said after a while, pouring coffee for them both. "Did you get a look at them?" Katherine nodded, accepting the steaming cup. 4 men. One had a scar across his cheek, another wore an eye patch. They killed the driver first, then the other passengers. "Why'd they let you live?" His tone wasn't accusatory, just curious. Katherine stared into her coffee. "They didn't intend to. They were taking me somewhere else first. I escaped while they were sleeping off their whiskey." Understanding darkened his eyes, but he asked no more questions on the subject. "You've got grit, Miss Bennett." "Not many could survive 3 days alone on the prairie." "Not sure I would have survived another day," she admitted. "Where were you headed when you found me?" "Rock Springs for supplies. I'm glad I took the southern route." He sipped his coffee, looking thoughtful. "I reckon we should head back to my place tomorrow. You can rest up proper, and when you're ready I'll take you to Rock Springs. The sheriff there will want your statement about the robbery." Katherine nodded, though the thought of retelling the horror made her stomach clench. "And after that?" Adam looked at her curiously. "Don't you have people waiting for you somewhere? Family?" "No." The word hung heavy in the evening air. "My parents died last winter, influenza. I was traveling to Salt Lake City to take a position as a school teacher." "I'm sorry to hear that." His sympathy seemed genuine. "Well, don't you worry about tomorrow's troubles tonight. For now, just rest." As darkness fell completely over the prairie, Katherine listened to the night sounds: the distant howl of a coyote, the whisper of wind through grass, the occasional stamp of Adam's horse tethered nearby. For the first time in days, she felt something close to peace. They set out at dawn, Katherine riding double with Adam on his sturdy buckskin gelding. She sat behind him, arms hesitantly circling his waist for balance. The proximity to a man she barely knew would normally have scandalized her, but circumstances had stripped away such concerns. "It's about 4 hours to my place," Adam told her as they rode. "Holler if you need to stop." The morning was cool, but Katherine knew the heat would build as the day progressed. They rode in companionable silence, the rhythmic movement of the horse almost hypnotic. Occasionally, Adam would point out landmarks or wildlife: a hawk circling overhead, a distant butte that marked the boundary of his property. By mid-morning, the landscape began to change subtly. A creek appeared, lined with cottonwoods and willows, the first trees Katherine had seen in days. They followed its winding course until Adam pointed to a distant shape on the horizon. "Home," he said simply. As they drew closer, Katherine could make out a modest cabin with a small barn and corral beside it. A few cattle grazed on the hillside beyond, and a garden patch stood near the cabin. It wasn't grand by any means, but to Katherine's eyes, it looked like paradise after her ordeal. A dog, some kind of collie mix, came bounding toward them, barking excitedly. "That's Ranger," Adam said, a smile in his voice. "Best cattle dog in Wyoming territory." They dismounted in front of the cabin. Katherine's legs trembled after the long ride, and Adam steadied her with a hand on her elbow. The simple contact sent an unexpected warmth through her. "It's not much," he said, suddenly looking self-conscious as he surveyed his homestead, "but it's mine." "It's lovely," Katherine replied honestly. After the vastness of the prairie, the little cabin looked incredibly inviting. The interior was spare but clean: a main room with a stone fireplace, rough-hewn table and chairs, a rocking chair beside the hearth, and a few shelves holding books that surprised her with their variety. A door at the back presumably led to a bedroom. "You'll take the bedroom," Adam said, setting down her canteen. "I'll bunk out here." "I couldn't possibly displace you, no argument, Miss Bennett," he cut in firmly. "My ma raised me better than to let a lady sleep on the floor." Katherine was too exhausted to protest further. Adam showed her to the bedroom, a simple space with a bed, chest of drawers, and a small window overlooking the creek. On the wall hung a faded daguerreotype of a smiling couple, presumably his parents. "I'll fetch water for washing up," he said, leaving her to the blessed privacy she hadn't experienced in days. When he returned with a pitcher and basin, he also brought a bundle of clothing. "These belong to my sister. She lived here a spell before she married and moved to California. They might be a bit large, but they're clean." "You have a sister?" Katherine asked, accepting the bundle gratefully. Adam nodded. "Younger by 2 years. Married a fella who went west for the gold rush. He didn't find gold, but he found work as a carpenter in Sacramento. They've got 3 little ones now. You must miss her." Something flickered in his eyes. "Every day, but she's happy there." He cleared his throat. "I'll leave you to rest. There's stew on for supper." Alone in the small bedroom, Katherine stripped off her ruined dress with relief. Using the water Adam had provided, she washed away days of dust and fear, the cool cloth against her skin a luxury beyond measure. The borrowed clothing, a simple calico dress and undergarments, was indeed a bit large but clean and whole. When she emerged from the bedroom, Adam was at the hearth, stirring a pot that filled the cabin with a mouth-watering aroma. He glanced up, and something in his expression made her self-consciously smooth the too large dress. "Better?" he asked. "Much. Thank you for your sister's clothes." "They suit you," he said simply, returning his attention to the stew. They ate at the small table, the stew rich with vegetables from his garden and beef from his herd. Katherine hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first bite touched her lips. She had to force herself to eat slowly, mindful of her manners despite her hunger. "This is wonderful," she said between bites. "You're quite the cook." Adam gave a slight smile. "When you live alone, you learn, or you eat poorly." "How long have you been here?" she asked. 5 years on my own. Before that, my pa and I worked this land together for 2 years. He didn't live to see much come of it." Adam's expression grew distant. Heart gave out. Ma had already passed the year we came west. "I'm sorry," Katherine said softly. "It must be lonely," he shrugged. "I've got Ranger. The cattle. Plenty of work to keep me busy." He paused. "What about you?" "You said you were to be a school teacher," Katherine nodded. "I taught at a small school back in Ohio. After my parents died, there was nothing keeping me there. When I saw the advertisement for a teacher needed in Salt Lake City, it seemed providential." "You still want to go there?" After what happened, the question gave her pause. The teaching position had been her lifeline, her only plan for survival after losing everything. But now, "I don't know," she admitted. "I don't have the money for passage anymore. The bandits took everything." Adam studied her thoughtfully. "Well, no need to decide tonight. You're welcome to stay here until you're recovered and can figure things out." The generosity of this near stranger overwhelmed her suddenly. Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. "I'm sorry," she said, hastily wiping them away. "It's just you've been so kind and you don't even know me." "Out here," Adam said quietly, "we help each other. That's how folks survive." He stood, clearing their empty bowls. "Get some rest, Miss Bennett. Tomorrow will be soon enough to worry about what comes next." That night, lying in Adam's bed, Katherine listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the Wyoming night. From the main room came the soft snores of Ranger and the occasional creak of floorboards as Adam shifted on his makeshift bed. Despite everything, she felt safer than she had in months since before her parents fell ill, perhaps. Sleep claimed her quickly, deep and dreamless. The next few days fell into an easy rhythm. Catherine's strength returned rapidly with regular meals and rest. She insisted on making herself useful, taking over the cooking and helping with the garden. Adam seemed both surprised and pleased by her willingness to work, though he repeatedly told her she needn't earn her keep. "I enjoy being useful," she told him on the third morning as she kneaded dough for bread. "Idle hands make me restless." Adam, cleaning his rifle at the table, glanced up with that small smile that was becoming familiar. "You're a strange kind of city lady, Miss Bennett." "I wasn't always a city lady," she replied. "My grandfather had a farm. I spent summers there as a girl." "That explains your way with the chickens," he said. The half-dozen hens he kept for eggs had taken an immediate liking to Katherine. On her 5th day at the cabin, Adam announced he needed to check on cattle grazing in the north section of his property. "Would you like to come along? Might do you good to get some air, see a bit more of the place." Katherine readily agreed. They rode double again, but this time she felt no awkwardness in holding onto his waist as the horse picked its way along the creek and up into the rolling hills beyond. Adam pointed out various landmarks and told her stories of his first difficult years on the land, the harsh winter that nearly broke him, the drought that followed, the slow building of his small herd. "It's beautiful country," Katherine said, genuinely moved by the vast landscape spreading before them. "Harsh but beautiful, that it is," Adam agreed. "Took me a while to see it. First year I just saw the difficulties, the distance to town, the isolation, the work that never ends. Now I can't imagine being anywhere else." They stopped on a ridge overlooking a valley where a dozen or so cattle grazed. Adam dismounted and helped Katherine down, his hands strong and sure at her waist. For a moment, they stood closer than propriety would allow, and Katherine felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with exertion. Adam stepped back first, clearing his throat. "We'll rest here a spell before heading back." They sat on sun-warmed rocks, sharing jerky and water from his canteen. Ranger explored the area, occasionally flushing a rabbit or ground squirrel but always returning to flop at Adam's feet. "Why didn't you ever marry?" Katherine asked, then immediately regretted the boldness of the question. "I'm sorry, that's terribly forward of me." But Adam didn't seem offended. "Fair question," he said, gazing out over his land. "Came close once before Pa and I headed west. Mary Ellen Wilkins. We were practically promised to each other since childhood. What happened? She didn't want to leave Illinois. Can't blame her, she had family, friends, a comfortable life. I had this dream of open country and land of my own." He shrugged. "Some dreams don't fit together, I guess. Do you regret it? Coming west?" Adam considered this. "No," he said finally. "I miss having people sometimes, but this land, it gets in your blood." Katherine understood. Even in her short time here, she'd begun to feel the pull of this place, the vastness of it, the quiet beauty, the sense of possibility. "What about you?" Adam asked. "No young man back in Ohio?" Katherine shook her head. "Teaching doesn't leave much time for courting, and after my parents died." She trailed off, thinking of those dark months of grief and worry. "Well, finding a husband wasn't my priority." They fell into companionable silence, watching an eagle soar high above the valley. That evening, as they sat on the cabin's small porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Katherine realized with a start that she felt content. More than content, at peace, in a way she hadn't felt since before her parents' illness. "Penny for your thoughts," Adam said, rocking gently in his chair. "I was just thinking how different this is from what I expected when I left Ohio," she admitted. "Not just the robbery, but all of it. The landscape, the people, you, me." His rocking paused. "Yes, you," Katherine said softly. "I never expected to meet someone so genuinely good. In the fading light, she couldn't quite read his expression. After a moment, he said, "I'm no saint, Katherine." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and it warmed her more than it should have. "Neither am I," she replied, "but kindness is rare enough to be remarkable, I think." The next morning, Adam announced he needed to ride into Rock Springs for supplies and to speak with the sheriff about the stagecoach robbery. "Would you come with me?" he asked as they finished breakfast. "The sheriff will want your account of what happened, and we need to figure out your situation." Katherine's heart sank a little at the reminder that her stay at Adam's cabin was temporary away station, not a destination. But of course, he was right. She couldn't impose on his hospitality indefinitely. "Of course," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I should see about finding work in town, perhaps, or inquire about another stagecoach to Salt Lake City." Something flickered in Adam's eyes, but he merely nodded. "We'll leave in an hour." Rock Springs was a rugged frontier town built to serve the newly constructed Transcontinental Railroad. Coal mines dotted the surrounding hills, and the town itself was a collection of wooden buildings strung along one main street, with smaller lanes branching off. Despite its modest size, the streets bustled with activity: miners coming off shift, merchants hawking wares, women shopping, children darting between horses and wagons. Katherine felt oddly overwhelmed by the noise and bustle after the quiet of Adam's homestead. She stayed close to his side as they made their way to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Holden was a weathered man with a gray mustache and shrewd eyes. He listened intently as Katherine recounted the stagecoach robbery, taking notes and occasionally asking a clarifying question. When she described the robbers, his expression darkened. "Sounds like the Blackwater gang," he said, looking up from his notes. "They've hit 3 stagecoaches in the territory this summer. Cold-blooded killers, every one of them." "Have you caught any of them?" Adam asked. The sheriff shook his head grimly. "Not yet, but this description helps, especially the fellow with the eye patch." He turned back to Katherine. "You're lucky to be alive, Miss Bennett. Not many escape those animals." "Will you need me to testify if you catch them?" Katherine asked. "Most likely," Sheriff Holden replied, "but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. For now, what are your plans?" Katherine glanced at Adam, then back at the sheriff. "I'm not entirely sure. I lost everything in the robbery: money, clothes, letters of introduction to my employers in Salt Lake City." The sheriff nodded sympathetically. "Tough situation. The stage line might provide some compensation, but that could take months to sort out." He scratched his chin thoughtfully. "As it happens, Rock Springs could use a teacher. Our last one left rather suddenly when her Eastern fiancé came to claim her. The town council's been looking for a replacement." Katherine's heart leaped. "Really? I was hired to teach in Salt Lake City." "I have experience. You'd have to speak with Mayor Simmons, but I can introduce you. He'll be at the general store about now." Adam, who had been quiet during this exchange, finally spoke. "Might be a good opportunity, Katherine, at least until you decide what you want to do long term." There was something in his tone she couldn't quite identify: encouragement, but perhaps a hint of reluctance as well. Before she could puzzle it out, the sheriff was leading them toward the door. "Come on, then. Let's catch the mayor before he heads back to his office." Mayor Simmons turned out to be a portly, jovial man with a booming voice and expansive gestures. Upon hearing Katherine's background and circumstances, he seemed almost delighted. "Providence," he declared. "That's what this is. We've been at our wits' end trying to find someone qualified before the fall term. The schoolhouse has been sitting empty since June." He peered at Katherine over his spectacles. "When could you start?" Katherine blinked, startled by the speed of developments. Well, I suppose immediately, but I would need lodging, and Mrs. Peterson takes in boarders," the mayor said, waving away her concerns. Respectable widow, very particular about who she lets rooms to. The school comes with a small stipend, of course. Not grand, but enough to live on. Katherine glanced at Adam, who had maintained a neutral expression throughout the exchange. "What do you think?" she asked softly. "It's a good opportunity," he said, his voice giving nothing away. "Rock Springs is a decent town, growing all the time with the railroad." She turned back to the mayor. "May I see the schoolhouse?" An hour later, Katherine stood in the one-room schoolhouse at the edge of town. It was simple but serviceable, with rows of desks facing a teacher's desk and blackboard. Shelves held a modest collection of books, and maps hung on the walls. Sunlight streamed through the windows, dust motes dancing in the beams. "We had 15 pupils last term," Mayor Simmons was saying. "Ages 6 to 14. Mostly from town, but a few from outlying ranches who board in town during the week." Katherine ran her fingers along the teacher's desk, remembering her classroom back in Ohio. This was what she had trained for, what she had crossed half the continent to do. And yet, she glanced at Adam, who stood near the door, hat in hands. His expression remained unreadable. "It's a fine schoolhouse," she said to the mayor. "When would the term begin?" "First Monday of September, just over 2 weeks from now." Mayor Simmons beamed. "So you'll take the position?" Katherine hesitated. It was the logical choice, a job doing what she was trained for in a growing town with opportunities. Yet something held her back. "May I have a day to consider?" she asked. "It's all happening rather quickly." The mayor looked disappointed but nodded. Of course. "But do let me know by tomorrow if possible. If you decline, we'll need to place advertisements immediately." Outside, the afternoon sun was hot on the boardwalk as they made their way to the general store for Adam's supplies. Neither of them spoke until they were inside the cool, dimly lit interior of the store. "You should take the position," Adam said suddenly as he examined a bin of nails. "It's what you came west to do." Katherine studied his profile. "It's similar, yes. Though Salt Lake City would have been quite different from Rock Springs. Bigger, more civilized, I expect." There was no judgment in his tone, just statement of fact. "Yes." She watched as he selected items methodically: coffee, flour, sugar, ammunition, a new shirt. "But I've grown rather fond of Wyoming." Adam paused, a can of peaches in his hand. "Have you now?" he asked quietly. "I have," Katherine said. Something shifted between them in that moment, a subtle change in the air, like the first hint of coming weather. Then the storekeeper approached, and the moment passed. They finished their shopping in companionable silence. Adam arranged for the heavier items to be delivered to his ranch the following week, and they loaded the rest into his saddlebags. As they prepared to leave town, Katherine asked to stop at Mrs. Peterson's boarding house. "I should at least see the place, if I'm considering the teaching position." Mrs. Peterson's house was a neat 2-story building with lace curtains and a well-tended garden. The widow herself was a brisk, no-nonsense woman who showed Katherine a small but pleasant room on the second floor. "I run a respectable house," Mrs. Peterson informed her. "No gentlemen callers in the rooms. Meals are served promptly at 7, noon, and 6. Laundry once a week." The room was furnished with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, a small writing desk, and a rocking chair by the window. It was perfectly adequate, certainly more comfortable than many places Katherine might have found herself after the stagecoach robbery. So why did it feel so confining after the open space of Adam's cabin? "It's a fine room," Katherine said politely. "Thank you for showing it to me. I'm still considering the teaching position, but I'll let you know my decision very soon." The ride back to Adam's ranch was quieter than the journey into town. Katherine's thoughts were a tangle of conflicting desires and practical considerations. The teaching position was a godsend, work she enjoyed, a respectable place to live, a community to join. It was the safe, sensible choice. Yet as they crested the final rise and Adam's cabin came into view, nestled against the backdrop of hills with the creek winding beside it, Katherine felt a tug in her chest that had nothing to do with sensibility. "Home, sweet home," Adam murmured, an echo of her thoughts that startled her. That evening, after a simple supper, they sat on the porch as had become their custom. The sky was a blaze of stars, the Milky Way a bright river overhead. Nighthawks called as they dove for insects, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote serenaded the moon. "I've been thinking," Adam said, breaking a long but comfortable silence, about you, your situation." He seemed to be choosing his words carefully. "If you don't want the teaching position in Rock Springs, there might be another option." Katherine turned to look at him, but his face was in shadow. "What sort of option?" Adam cleared his throat. "Rock Springs isn't the only place needing a teacher. Folks around here, the ranchers and homesteaders, we've got children too. Most can't get to town regular for schooling." "A rural school?" Katherine asked, intrigued, more like, "A school right here." Now he turned to face her, his expression earnest in the faint light spilling from the cabin window. "There's 8, maybe 10 children within riding distance. We've talked before about pooling resources for a teacher, but never found the right person." Katherine's heart began to beat faster. "You mean teaching here, at your ranch?" Adam nodded. "We could fix up the old bunkhouse, it's sound, just needs cleaning and some furniture. The families would contribute to your salary, and you could stay here in the cabin if you wanted." The implication of his words hung in the night air between them. "Adam," Katherine said carefully, "are you asking me to marry you?" Even in the dim light, she could see the flush creep up his neck. "I know it's sudden," he said, "and if you don't feel, that is, I wouldn't expect." He took a deep breath and started again. "Yes, I'm asking if you might consider becoming my wife." Katherine's mind whirled. She'd known Adam Tucker for barely a week, yet in that time he'd saved her life, shared his home, and shown her nothing but kindness and respect. Was it possible to know your heart so quickly? "You don't have to answer now," Adam said hurriedly, misinterpreting her silence. "It's a big decision. I just wanted you to know there's a place for you here if you want it." Katherine reached out and placed her hand over his where it rested on the arm of his chair. "You're right that it's sudden," she said softly, "but these past days, I've felt more at home here than I have anywhere since my parents died." Adam turned his hand over, his fingers intertwining with hers. "Is that a yes?" "It's a I need a little time," Katherine replied honestly. "But it's also a I care for you, Adam Tucker, more than I thought possible in so short a time." His smile in the darkness was worth everything. "I can live with that," he said, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. They sat together under the stars, hands joined, possibilities stretching before them like the vast Wyoming sky. The next morning, Katherine woke with a clarity she hadn't expected. Sometime in the night, her heart had made its decision, though her mind was still working through the practical considerations. Adam was already outside when she emerged from the bedroom, his sleeves rolled up as he repaired a section of the corral fence. He looked up as she approached, his hammer pausing mid-swing. "Morning," he said, a question in his eyes. "Good morning," she replied. "I've been thinking about your proposal." Adam set down his hammer, giving her his full attention. "And before I give you my answer, I need to understand exactly what you're offering." Katherine took a deep breath. "Is this a marriage of convenience, Adam, a practical arrangement for both of us, or is it something more?" The directness of her question seemed to surprise him, but after a moment, a slow smile spread across his face. "Katherine Bennett," he said, From the moment I found you on that prairie, something changed for me. I'd been living, but I wasn't really alive, if that makes any sense." He stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "This isn't about convenience. It's about how I feel when you're in a room. It's about wanting to see your face across the table every morning for the rest of my days." Joy bloomed in Katherine's chest, bright and unexpected. "Then my answer is yes," she said simply. "I'll marry you, Adam Tucker." For a moment he just stared at her as if he couldn't believe what he'd heard. Then he closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands coming up to frame her face. "May I kiss you?" he asked, his voice husky. Katherine nodded, her heart hammering against her ribs. His lips met hers gently at first, then with growing confidence as she responded. It was her first real kiss, nothing like the chaste peck a childhood sweetheart had once stolen, and it left her breathless and wanting more. When they finally broke apart, Adam rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "I never thought," he began. "Neither did I," Katherine whispered. "But here we are." They rode into Rock Springs the next day to share their news. Mayor Simmons was disappointed to lose his prospective teacher, but offered genuine congratulations. Sheriff Holden agreed to perform the ceremony, as the nearest preacher only came through town once a month. "Don't see why you should wait," the sheriff said with a wink. "Folks get married quick out here. Life's too short and hard to waste time on long engagements." Mrs. Peterson agreed to help Katherine select fabric for a wedding dress from the general store's limited options. "Not much choice, I'm afraid," the widow said as they examined bolts of cloth. "But this blue would suit your coloring beautifully." Katherine ran her fingers over the soft blue cotton. "It's perfect," she said, thinking of her ruined dress from Ohio and how different her life had become since then. The wedding was set for 3 days, hence just enough time for Mrs. Peterson and 2 other ladies from town to help Katherine stitch her dress, and for Adam to make a quick trip to his ranch and back to prepare the cabin for his bride. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and warm, with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of late summer across the prairie. Katherine dressed in her new blue dress, her hair arranged simply with wildflowers Adam had gathered for her. Mrs. Peterson, who had taken on the role of maternal figure with surprising enthusiasm, dabbed at her eyes as she helped with the final touches. "You make a lovely bride, my dear." "Thank you," Katherine said, surprised by her own calm. "For everything." The ceremony took place in the town's small courthouse, with a handful of witnesses: Mrs. Peterson, the mayor, the general store owner and his wife, and 2 of Adam's neighboring ranchers who'd ridden in for the occasion. Sheriff Holden, looking uncomfortable in a clean shirt and string tie, performed the brief civil ceremony with unexpected dignity. "Do you, Adam Tucker, take Katherine Bennett to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" Adam's gray eyes never left Katherine's as he answered, "I do." When Katherine repeated the same vow, her voice was clear and sure. The sheriff pronounced them husband and wife, and Adam's kiss was both tender and promising. There was a small celebration afterward at the hotel dining room, with cake provided by the hotel cook, and a few bottles of whiskey courtesy of the mayor. Toasts were offered, stories were told, and Katherine found herself welcomed into the small community with genuine warmth. As the afternoon waned, they said their goodbyes and mounted Adam's horse for the ride home, their home now. The thought sent a little thrill through Katherine as they left the town behind. They rode in companionable silence for a while, Katherine's arms around Adam's waist, her cheek resting against his back. The vastness of the prairie spread around them, golden in the late afternoon light. "Happy?" Adam asked over his shoulder. Very, she replied, tightening her arms around him. It's strange how life works sometimes. A week ago, I was certain I was going to die alone on this prairie. Adam's hand covered hers where it rested against his stomach. And now I can't imagine being anywhere else. It was the simple truth, Katherine realized. Whatever doubts she might have had about the swiftness of their courtship had vanished. This man, this land, they had become essential to her in ways she was only beginning to understand. They reached the cabin as the sun was setting, painting the sky in spectacular hues. Adam helped her down from the horse, but instead of releasing her, he swept her into his arms. "What are you doing?" Katherine laughed, her arms going around his neck. "Carrying my bride over the threshold," Adam replied with a grin. "It's tradition, isn't it?" He carried her into the cabin, which looked different, somehow cleaner, with wildflowers in a jar on the table and a colorful quilt on the rocking chair that hadn't been there before. Sarah Potter, one of the neighbor ladies, brought over the quilt as a wedding gift, Adam explained, seeing her notice it. And I might have spent a little extra time tidying up. The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched Katherine deeply. "It's perfect," she said, and meant it. That night, as husband and wife, they discovered each other with tenderness and growing passion. Katherine's initial nervousness dissolved under Adam's gentle touch and evident desire. By the time they lay tangled together in the aftermath, her head on his chest and his arm curved protectively around her, she felt truly and completely his wife. "I never thought I'd find this," Adam murmured into her hair. "Out here, I mean. I'd made my peace with being alone." Katherine traced patterns on his chest, marveling at the intimacy they now shared. "I was resigned to it as well, an unmarried schoolteacher dedicated to other people's children. And now," she smiled in the darkness, "now I'm thinking our own children might ride to school alongside our neighbors someday." His arm tightened around her. "I'd like that," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Very much." The days that followed took on a rhythm of their own. Katherine learned the routines of ranch life, cooking on the temperamental wood stove, tending the garden, collecting eggs, helping with the endless chores that kept their small homestead functioning. Adam proved to be a patient teacher, never making her feel inadequate when she struggled with an unfamiliar task. "You're a natural," he told her one evening as they sat on the porch after a long day. "Most city women would be running back to town by now." Katherine laughed. "I'm not sure that's true, but I appreciate the vote of confidence." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Besides, I find I like the work. There's satisfaction in it, seeing the direct results of your labor." "That there is," Adam agreed. "It's one of the things I love about this life. Hard as it can be sometimes." 2 weeks after the wedding, they rode to the Potter's ranch, the nearest neighbors some 5 miles distant, to discuss Katherine's proposal for a rural school. Sarah and Thomas Potter welcomed them warmly, their 3 children peering shyly at Katherine from behind their mother's skirts. "It's a fine idea," Thomas said when Katherine had outlined her plan. "We've worried about the little one's education. Can't always spare them from chores to send them into town, especially in winter. And there are the Wilson children and the Hansons' brood," Sarah added. "That's 7 children right there, without counting the Johnsons further north." By the end of the visit, plans were in place to clean out and refurbish Adam's old bunkhouse as a schoolroom. The families would contribute both labor and materials, as well as a modest salary for Katherine, paid partly in cash and partly in goods: eggs, meat, vegetables, firewood. "We can start after harvest," Thomas suggested. "Be ready by the time winter sets in." On the ride home, Katherine could barely contain her excitement. "It's really happening," she said, her arms around Adam's waist. "Our school." Adam's hand squeezed hers. You've brought something special to this place, Katherine. To all of us. Life settled into a pattern that fall days filled with work and evenings spent in quiet companionship. They rode into Rock Springs twice for supplies and to check if there was any news about the stagecoach robbers. The second time, Sheriff Holden had news. Territorial Marshal caught 2 of them over near Green River, he told them. Not the leaders, but they're singing like birds to save their necks. Just a matter of time before we get the rest. Will Katherine need to testify? Adam asked, his arm protective around his wife's shoulders. Most likely, the sheriff replied, but not for a while yet. Court only sits twice a year out here. As they rode home, Katherine was thoughtful. I'm not afraid to testify, she said, but I'll be glad when it's over. When that part of my life is truly behind me. Adam understood. Those men took something from you that goes beyond the material things. Your sense of safety, maybe. Yes, she agreed, but I'm reclaiming it day by day. Work on the schoolhouse began in late October, after the last hay was cut and the garden harvested. Men from 3 ranches gathered at Adam's place, bringing tools, lumber, and willing hands. Katherine and the other women provided food and helped where they could, while the children darted excitedly around the activity, already anticipating their new school. The old bunkhouse was sturdy but basic, a single large room with small windows and a pot-bellied stove. Under the direction of Thomas Potter, who had carpentry skills, the men expanded the windows to let in more light, built benches and desks, installed a larger stove, and constructed a proper blackboard. Katherine watched with growing excitement as the humble building was transformed into a schoolhouse. What do you think? Adam asked her as they stood in the doorway on the final day of work, surveying the results. Katherine took in the neat rows of desks, the blackboard, the shelf Adam had built specially for books, the colorful map of the United States that Mayor Simmons had donated. It's wonderful, she said, squeezing his hand. Better than the schoolhouse in Rock Springs. They planned to begin lessons the following week, with 8 children enrolled, initially 3 Potters, 2 Wilsons, and 3 Hansons. Katherine spent hours preparing lessons appropriate for the range of ages and abilities, from 6-year-old Becky Hanson to 14-year-old James Potter. The night before the first day of school, she was uncharacteristically nervous, checking and rechecking her materials at the kitchen table. They're going to love you, Adam assured her, massaging her shoulders as she sat hunched over her lesson book. I want to do right by them, Katherine said. These children deserve a proper education, even out here. And they'll get one, he said confidently. The best teacher in Wyoming territory is right here. The first day of school dawned cold but clear. Katherine had been up since before dawn, too excited and nervous to sleep. She dressed with care in her best dress, pinned her hair neatly, and packed the lunch she'd prepared the night before. Ready? Adam asked as they walked together to the converted bunkhouse. He'd insisted on building a proper path from the cabin to the school, lined with flat stones to keep Katherine's boots out of the mud. As I'll ever be, she replied, clutching her books to her chest. The children arrived on horseback or in wagons with their parents, their faces alight with excitement and trepidation in equal measure. Katherine welcomed each one with a warm smile and a personal greeting, assigning seats based on age and size. Standing before them at last, chalk in hand, Katherine felt a surge of rightness. This was where she was meant to be, not in a city schoolhouse, but here, bringing knowledge to these frontier children who might otherwise have gone without. Welcome to our school, she began. I'm Mrs. Tucker, and I'm very excited to be your teacher. The school thrived through the early winter. The children proved eager to learn, their natural intelligence sharpened by the practical demands of ranch life. Katherine adapted her teaching to incorporate their experiences, using the rhythms of ranch work for arithmetic problems and the natural world around them for science lessons. December brought the first heavy snow, transforming the landscape into a pristine wonderland. School attendance became more sporadic as travel grew difficult, but Katherine used the quieter days to work one-on-one with the children who could make it. Christmas approached, bringing with it preparations for a small school pageant. The children practiced recitations and songs, while the mothers secretly sewed costumes and prepared treats. Katherine, too, had a secret. For weeks, she'd been experiencing morning sickness and unusual fatigue. At first, she'd attributed it to the demands of teaching and ranch life. But as her monthly cycle failed to appear for the second time, she could no longer deny the likely cause. She waited until Christmas Eve to tell Adam. They had spent the day preparing for the holiday, decorating the cabin with pine boughs, baking cookies from Sarah Potter's recipe, wrapping the simple gifts they'd ordered from the general store in Rock Springs for each other. As they sat before the fire that night, the cabin warm and fragrant with pine and cinnamon, Katherine took Adam's hand. "I have an early Christmas gift for you," she said softly. "One that won't arrive for several months yet." Adam looked confused for a moment, then understanding dawned in his eyes. "Katherine, are you saying?" She nodded, suddenly tearful with joy. "We're going to have a baby, sometime in July, I think." Adam's face transformed with wonder. He pulled her into his arms, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "A baby," he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. "Our baby." He placed a gentle hand on her still flat stomach, as if trying to connect with the tiny life growing within. "I never thought. That is, I hoped, but—" "I know," Katherine said, covering his hand with her own. "It's a miracle, isn't it? Our own little miracle." The news of Katherine's pregnancy spread quickly through their small community, bringing congratulations and practical offers of help. Sarah Potter promised to take over teaching duties when Katherine's time came, and the other women began planning quilts and baby clothes. Winter deepened, bringing days when the children couldn't make it to school at all. Adam used the time to build a cradle, working in the barn during the coldest hours while Katherine prepared lessons or sewed tiny garments. In February, a letter arrived from the territorial marshal, delivered by a neighbor returning from Rock Springs. The remaining members of the Blackwater gang had been captured after a shootout near Laramie. Katherine would need to testify at their trial in April. "I'll go with you," Adam said immediately. "We can stay in Rock Springs for as long as necessary." Katherine nodded, relieved. The prospect of facing the men who had murdered her fellow passengers and intended worse for her was daunting, but having Adam by her side made it bearable. The trial was held in the Rock Springs courthouse over 3 tense days in early April. Katherine, now visibly pregnant, testified clearly and calmly about the robbery and her escape. She didn't flinch when identifying the robbers, though their cold eyes and sneers made her blood run cold. In the end, justice was swift and severe. All 4 men were convicted of murder and sentenced to hang. Katherine felt no joy in their fate, only relief that they would never harm anyone else. "It's over," Adam said as they rode away from Rock Springs for the last time, the courthouse receding behind them. "That chapter of your life is closed for good." Katherine leaned against his back, her rounded belly making the ride less comfortable than usual. "Our life is what matters now," she said. "You, me, and this little one." Spring brought renewal to the ranch, calves in the pasture, shoots in the garden, wildflowers dotting the prairie. School resumed with renewed enthusiasm as the children brought discoveries from the awakening land to share. By June, Katherine had grown too unwieldy to teach comfortably. Sarah Potter took over, using Katherine's lesson plans but adding her own flourishes. Katherine used the time to prepare for the baby, nesting instincts in full force as she cleaned and organized the cabin over and over. Adam watched her with amused tolerance, only putting his foot down when she attempted to rearrange the heavy furniture by herself. "That's what husbands are for," he told her firmly, moving the bed to the exact spot she indicated. July arrived with scorching heat. Katherine's discomfort grew as the baby dropped lower, her back aching constantly. Adam barely left her side, delegating ranch work to a young hand he'd hired for the summer months. Their son arrived on a sweltering afternoon after a labor that left Katherine exhausted but triumphant. Sarah Potter served as midwife, her capable hands guiding the baby into the world while Adam paced anxiously outside until the first lusty cry brought him running. "A boy," Sarah announced, placing the squalling, red-faced infant in Katherine's arms. "Healthy as a horse and just as loud." Adam knelt beside the bed, tears streaming unashamedly down his face as he gazed at his son. "He's perfect," he whispered, touching the tiny hand with one calloused finger. They named him William Thomas Tucker William, for Katherine's father, Thomas for their friend and neighbor who had done so much to help establish their school. The first weeks of William's life passed in a blur of feeding, changing, and stolen moments of sleep. Katherine discovered reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed, while Adam revealed a tender side in his care for both mother and child. By September, life had settled into a new routine. Katherine resumed teaching, with baby William in a cradle beside her desk. The children were enchanted by the infant, vying for chances to rock the cradle or sing to him when he fussed. One evening in late October, just over a year since Katherine had first become lost on the prairie, she and Adam sat on the porch watching the sunset. William slept peacefully in her arms, his little face relaxed in complete trust. "I was thinking about the day we met," Katherine said, stroking the baby's fine hair. "How close I came to dying out there." Adam reached over to take her free hand. "I still thank God every day that I decided to take the southern route to town. It's strange to think how differently things might have gone," she mused. "If the stagecoach hadn't been robbed, if you hadn't found me, if I'd continued on to Salt Lake City. You ever regret it?" Adam asked quietly. "The path your life took," Katherine looked from her sleeping son to her husband's face, so dear and familiar now. "Not for a single moment," she said with absolute certainty. "I was lost in more ways than one when you found me, Adam, not just on the prairie but in my life. I was surviving but not really living. And now," she smiled, squeezing his hand, "now I'm exactly where I'm meant to be, with exactly who I'm meant to be with." Adam leaned over to kiss her softly. "The day I found you was the luckiest day of my life." "Not luck," Katherine replied. "Destiny." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, they sat in contented silence. A family forged from chance and choice and love, the surest foundation for a life on the frontier, or anywhere else. Winter came again, blanketing the ranch in snow and bringing cozy evenings by the fire. William grew stronger daily, mastering rolling over and sitting up, his personality emerging in smiles and coos that delighted his parents. The school continued to thrive, with 3 more children joining as new families settled in the area. Katherine found deep satisfaction in watching her pupils' progress, their minds opening to new ideas and possibilities. Adam expanded the ranch operations, buying additional cattle and improving the pasture land with Thomas Potter's help. The hard work of frontier life never eased, but it was shared work now, husband and wife building something lasting together. On the anniversary of their wedding, Adam presented Katherine with a proper gold band to replace the simple silver one they'd purchased for their hasty ceremony. "I've been saving for it," he explained as he slipped it onto her finger beside the original ring. "Wanted to give you something worthy of what you've given me." "Oh, Adam," Katherine said, tears welling in her eyes. "It's beautiful. But you've already given me everything I could want: this home, our son, your love. And you gave me a reason to build something more than just a ranch," he replied, drawing her into his arms. "A family, a school, a future." As they stood together in the cabin that had become a true home, Katherine thought of that desperate day on the prairie when she'd believed all was lost. How wrong she'd been. Instead of an ending, it had been the beginning of love, of family, of a life richer than she could have imagined. She had been wandering lost and alone, and Adam Tucker had found her. But more than that, he had given her a reason to stay, to put down roots in this wild, beautiful land. And together, they had created something that would endure long after they were gone, a legacy of love and learning that would shape generations to come. Outside, snow fell softly on the Wyoming prairie, covering the land in a pristine blanket. But inside, all was warmth and light, a beacon in the wilderness, a testament to the power of finding home in the most unexpected of places.